Brittney is the director of BTR sales and institutional relationships. Thank you. We had a chance to meet and connect in Dallas a few weeks back at the IMN conference for BTR. It was really awesome. Such good conversations there. And with these conferences, it's heavy conference season. And so we're all kind of having these conversations and catching up. We're just chatting about that briefly. But had a really good chat about all sorts of things, but ultimately about, the whole change of motion for BTR and how BTR is different than multifamily and maybe even single family as well. We'll dig into that a little bit today, and ultimately how you got into this role and how you kind of got to where you are. So for everyone listening today, getting how yes is about kind of the new way of selling, right? The modern way of selling and why it's different than the old way. Certainly everyone talks about partnerships over and over again, but certainly I feel like right now, especially given the shift of information and information power, we really as sellers need to think about what's the problem we're seeking to solve, why it's urgent, and who we can solve it for. And the struggle we have often is like being relevant with the conversation when the problem is not a priority for our buyer, and finding how those who's people are and why they want to buy. That's kind of the nature of these conversations. This is always brought to you by IRCX. We're AI remote maintenance and inspection software, helping you kind of speed up turns, speed up work orders. And yeah, if you have any questions about that, you always can DM me and I'll be happy to chat. Now, as we always kick this off, Brittney, a little bit about yourself, your background, how you got into this role is always an exciting part. And then what's the problem you're solving at mind, and who you're solving it for.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for having me here, Mo. And yes, it was definitely amazing meeting you, catching up, getting to talk through those conversations that were vast and ranged across many different subjects, but ultimately really, really great digging in on industry discussions. So thank you again for having me. I am, as you mentioned, Brittney White with Roofstock Mind, and we are basically tech-enabled property management. So we can actually bread and butter property management, asset management. We can cover the full life cycle of your assets. So we actually also cover brokerage services, portfolio services, and acquisitions across the market. So definitely able to handle whatever the needs are with multiple different lines of business services. But I particularly come from legacy multifamily primarily. That's pretty much my entire past life career. But even before that, I actually grew up in real estate. So very much intertwined with the inner workings of real estate from the sales perspective, as both my parents are brokers. My very first job was in their real estate office that they owned. And from there, just various different aspects of the real estate industry, from industrial short sales to commercial leasebacks, short sale negotiations, and then into commercial property management, which then led me into residential property management. So from there, I worked my way up within multifamily. And most recently on the multifamily side, I specialized in challenging lease-ups, particularly on the high-rise, high-end luxury product. And so from there, I was able to leverage that, and brought on by Mind at the time, prior to our merger with Roofstock. I was brought on for the sole purpose of developing and building out on the operational side a BTR playbook. Mm-hmm. And so I was able to take a lot of those multifamily workings and multifamily understandings and marry that with our very, very well-established single-family rental platform, and built out a very unique approach and hybrid approach to BTR, specifically because BTR, as many of us now know, it's not multifamily and it's not single family. And huge misconception in the industry is that you can just plug and play somewhat of a cookie cutter approach to multifamily. And a lot of these legacy multifamily operators are doing that. And so the more they're bringing them on, they're applying it to a BTR approach. And unfortunately, they're finding that there are a lot of inefficiencies with that approach. And so that's why we were able to really optimize kind of a very well-established playbook for BTR on our end. And so love to dig into that more with you.
I had one prospect early in the year mention to me, like, BTR is just like multifamily, except for the margins are lower and we can't make any money at it. And I was like, yeah. Okay, explain a little bit of that. And it's almost like they're in the BTR market, like accidentally, and then have these kind of contracts and PMAs they got to manage towards, and they're like, "This is killing us." And it was a very interesting conversation. And that's what happens sometimes. So for your clients now, just for everyone to understand, we're talking about clients this is a B2B conversation, not a B2C conversation. And so your clients, from a property management perspective, are who?
So we have a range. So we actually leverage also, we service retail customers in addition to institutional clients. So I would say we actually would be more of a 60-40 split. So 60% institutional clients, 40% retail. So your mom and pop homeowners who are needing, their 1 to 10 unit portfolio to be leased out, we can manage on behalf of those investors as well. But from my perspective and what I really mostly focus on, it would be the institutional client, right? So we're looking at a wide range of what that would even look like. We can have a smaller institutional client that's kind of just now dipping their toes in the water at BTR, and we can have a larger scale mass, the very much national contract, national institutional clients that have, thousands of BTR homes on their platform and are looking for efficiencies in the operations of that. And so we can certainly accommodate anyone that would have that need.
So a home builder, let's go say 300 units. In a single community, would that be part of your target market?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we specialize in that, and we've taken on the 20 unit BTR, even 6 unit BTR have on our platform. I would say probably the most common that you would see average size is shifting. It was previously more along the lines of the 75 unit, maybe townhome communities attached product that's dedicated. I'm seeing more and more of a shift to something that does resemble a little bit more multifamily, where they are dedicated communities, maybe single family standalone homes, detached, that are highly amenitized. So there's a wide range, right? And those usually run around 150 to 200 units typically is the average. But we are seeing somewhat of the evolution of this asset class. And so that does come with some nuances in terms of the size. But for us, we can cover it all. We do, our huge strength that we're able to leverage is that we've sort of backwards engineered this already because of the well-established playbook and the proprietary software that we've developed that allows us to leverage a centralized approach to a lot of this property management aspect. And so with that and those tech-enabled functions, we can centrally approach management of a lot of these kind of smaller size, maybe 75 unit or so products after lease up. So upon stabilization, we can go fully centrally operated. If there's smaller, we can do a centralized approach altogether, or we can do on-site staffing and facilitate it more in line with multifamily, but with additional efficiencies and less payroll on top of that. So we have
like centralization as a service kind of thing is the I'll say that's the bullseye. And then the Radiant, if someone does want it to have it an on-site solution, you guys can accommodate that as well.
Absolutely, yeah, and we do.
So then, curious, as you open it up, like multifamily, BTR, SFR, they're not horizontal apartments as they used to be called at some point in time. Like, what's the difference from an operations perspective? Because that's going to lead us into the problem you solve.
Right. So let's say single family. A lot of folks have, unfortunately, they came in and they were trying to manage these as single family because maybe they look like that. Maybe they are part of a larger scale, say 3,000 unit master plan community development where it's primarily retail, but there's a little pocket of 200 homes within that are actual rentals. So they think that, okay, we're going to go ahead and manage this the exact same way, which is a very simple, streamlined ILS system for your individual listings. So like say Zillow is going to get one listing for each individual home. And they say, okay, great. I did my marketing. That's sufficient. And the problem with that is that you do have to leverage a little bit more of that multifamily piece where you're having to get creative with your marketing. This is not a for sale home where MLS is kind of the end all be all with its ILSs that it syndicates to. This is going to take a more dedicated approach on your marketing. And so we had to leverage some of those resources. And so implementing those solutions that did resemble more like multifamily, that's where I think we were able to see huge efficiency. And we've got tons of case studies that were able to speak to that, where we leveraged just specific marketing solutions that were needed for that specific home or that specific community. And with that, we were able to stabilize a very struggling, say, asset of management of over a year at 40% at the time that we came on, a year into the lease up. And we were able to, within 5 months, get that completely stabilized, just leveraging the certain marketing solutions that were necessary. But then on the other hand, flip side, what we see quite a bit of are these legacy multifamily operators that are coming in and they're trying to apply a playbook for multifamily that is the exact same as any other apartment community. And unfortunately, that does come with a lot of unnecessary bells and whistles. It comes with chargebacks that are very much unnecessary on, let's just say, payroll. They're going to have a very hefty payroll right off the bat because they don't have a centralized operational function where they can facilitate some of those needs. So they're going to have a heavy payroll. They're going to have solutions that are third-party solutions that you do have to pay back for and gets charged back to the owner. A lot of that's already built into our software because it is a proprietary software system. There's going to be a lot of those third-party solutions that are going to be completely eliminated in terms of your operating budget, but not in terms of the actual functionality. We still provide that service. So a good example would be a resident portal. Typically on a multifamily operator, you're going to get charged back for that resident portal. Your software costs are going to be charged back. That's in fact, that's probably your largest item on your G&A. For us, that's already built in. You're already getting that with our service. And so there's a lot of efficiencies that we can provide. In addition to that, they're applying more of a cookie cutter approach to every single community. And so when I say that, I mean, they have large scale national contracts that have doors that they have to meet, right? So with those contracts, they're going to recommend this particular solution to every single community, and they're going to across the board try and sign you onto that and charge that back to you. While we do get national pricing on some of our services and vendors, we do not apply that cookie cutter approach to every single community. We will do a deep dive analysis of that particular community and determine what solutions are going to be most effective for that market and for that target demographic, and then we'll apply those. So it does have a lot of efficiency in that regard as well.
Can you give an example of just one of those services or national contracts?
Sure. So maybe they're going to require that you do apartments.com, a very large community page, a package for apartments.com, for example. And I, don't get me wrong, love apartments.com, think it's very, very useful, but in certain markets, it's not. That target market is not necessarily going to leverage that. If you're more in a rural area, maybe you're going to be more dependent upon Zillow. So we're going to do an analysis. We're going to even dig into what solutions the competitors that we are competing against are going to be leveraging. We're going to see where the most efficient use of our marketing spend is, and then we will pivot and reallocate as needed throughout that process.
Is that because a lot of the BTR space is suburban versus like urban, that you might see the density of multifamily?
I wouldn't say, I wouldn't say that's the reason. I think that there's just a hesitancy for a lot of, no one's going to really get fired by getting a big name legacy multifamily operator in there if they don't really work out, right? That was the safe choice in their minds. And there's this evolution where we're trying to educate and allow owners to understand that you don't always have to go with just that name, that just because that name's associated with it does not mean it's going to be the most efficient for you. And so I think there's just this continuous re-education and education in the industry where we're teaching them that you don't have to take that same approach to these. Just because they kind of feel like multifamily does not mean they are multifamily. And so we have a different approach that is most effective. We have case studies to back that up. And it's just an education process as we go. And I'm hearing more and more about that as I go to these conferences, like where I met you. I'm meeting more individuals that are very much in line with that have been previous BTR operators elsewhere, or they currently still are. They're BTR owners, and they've been looking for this solution. They've been thinking this already in their mind, like, why are we spending so much on this? Is that really necessary? Do we have to invest that? Does this particular renter want to have the exact same type of services as someone leveraging, maybe more of an urban approach in multifamily? You no longer need the high-rise pool. This person is now prioritizing a fenced yard and a garage with a driveway, so it's a different demographic. And I think we underestimate that demographic in terms of what it is that they're really looking for.
Well, especially when you look at amenities like a driveway, like a garage, like a yard, like a fence, like a garage, those amenities are unit level amenities versus community level amenities. And so you can actually test out how an amenity can drive rentability of a specific unit versus it's part of the community and we don't know if they're going to use it or not.
Correct. Right. And that's exactly what I'm saying also to the cookie cutter approach, right? Where sometimes they will just kind of say, okay, they all want this amenity. And it's like, well, no, actually, maybe this particular community, this demographic is going to really, really value resident events and having resident functions all the time. Whereas this one over here, they don't really care to interact because maybe that's just what that demographic's demand is. And so let's go ahead and pivot, take those dollars, allocate them elsewhere, and just make sure that we're really being very strategic about the way we approach service.
So when you take a look at like so what I heard kind of opening from a leasing perspective, we've talked about leasing so far, and leasing from multifamily. Someone's selling to us. Leasing in multifamily is something that is very fine-tuned, and it sounds like you borrowed a little bit from that. But then, like you also dropped about the centralization pieces that you guys have already built in as a service, and multifamily is just getting into centralization as a. And I'd say they're not even getting into it. They're kind of like testing it, dipping their toe in the water. They're kind of poking it with a stick to see if it's poisonous and dangerous. You look at adoption rates of centralization; it's sputtering, right, in terms of like what it can do and who it does, problems it solves, who it solves for, and where it solves best. So you're taking a bit from multifamily from a leasing perspective. Now we talk about how you mentioned it earlier, and I'll keep coming back to this throughout the show today, is the difference between multifamily, BTR, and SFR. So SFR was born in a centralized state. There was no real way to even consider it, but you've already brought in a hybrid solution where you can do centralized services and do on-site services through a single provider. So that's kind of a bit of a blend that you can't really do if you're strictly a single family operator. So how are you finding that, like, is that the problem? Like if I'm an institutional owner of, let's say, we'll kind of talk about a 300 unit, imaginary 300 unit institutional property owner, and they've got 300 units. They're in just outside of Houston in the Woodlands, and they've got whatever kind of your classic side by side attached homes in BTR. They've got a problem in that if they go to conventional, or they just try it the old way using conventional multifamily approaches, they may be able to solve the leasing piece of it, hit or miss, but they may be not able to solve the operations part of it. So how is operations different between like a conventional multifamily, and just for a problem statement, right? Why does that old approach not necessarily work? And then how do you bring in that optimizations?
Sure. Yeah. So to your point, it's something that they're dipping their toe in the water on, right? And what I like to always kind of say is, having been in the multifamily side of things at the time of, say, COVID, and the pandemic took place, there was a sudden urge or rush to try and push towards certain, optimizations in terms of payroll, where they are outsourcing some of the roles. So, for example, a lot of legacy multifamily operators now, first and probably easiest step for them to do this was to remove the assistant property manager, which serves as the accounting function on site for a lot of these multifamily deals. They were able to centralize that and or just completely outsource it altogether to a third party, which I'm sure got billed back to the owner. But in which case they were rushing to do that. They were really pushing for it. And as we also saw during that time frame, that's when we started to see a sudden surge in the need and desire for self-tour functions, right? Everyone was trying to figure out ways to accommodate that. Multifamily, it's much harder to do because you have protected, controlled access areas such as amenities. You can't have individuals coming and going. That's one of the benefits of a controlled access community, is that you don't have people at all hours unescorted walking around your community who are not screened residents, right? So they were really pushing for that as well. With that, we, as I say, backwards engineered it. We already had all of those functionalities set up. So with the ability to do self-touring, we have the ability to cover your time frames more, right? You can start at 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. So it's a larger window for your potential prospective prospects to be able to come through and tour. All of that's already built into the software system. Our centralized approach is our centralized teams who are already there to alleviate a lot of those needs. So we have a dedicated leasing team who is a leasing agent who is there to help sell. We have a dedicated answering service. Again, that's a service that would typically be billed back to you at a third-party solution. With a multifamily operator, it's already included in our services. Dedicated answering service team, call center, dedicated maintenance individuals, and I know we'll probably get into that a little bit more, but the field services teams we actually have already in market. So we assign these, typically at a centralized approach, we assign these per market depending upon door count. So we'll have an average door count that we'll assign for those individuals, and we'll hire accordingly as we open more doors within that market. And they will serve as basically maintenance shops on wheels. They'll have vans that have all of the necessary supplies within them, and they'll come out on an as needed basis. It actually does speak to a more personalized and I guess customer service oriented approach, because a lot of the argument with a lot of legacy multifamily operators, or the concern with owners, is that we're taking away some of that personal touch that these residents have, or that personal interaction that they have, customer service approach? Are we pulling back on quality to, heighten efficiency? And I would argue that we're actually doing a better job of customer service as a result of some of these operations. And the reason being is that our software system, the workflows that are in place, actually allow for more of an efficient resolution to a lot of these services. So say there's a work order that comes through, we are able to troubleshoot that work order in real time with that resident. In addition, on the call, we're able to log notes, conversationally talk through it. Anyone can jump and see where they left off with this. We can give them any kind of tips, say, oh, the dishwasher's not working. Hey, have you tried that switch right there, right? A lot of that can be done somewhat with multifamily, but they can also schedule within the app, schedule the time for them to go out to the community. Whereas with multifamily, it's really more a matter of like, hey, we're going to come in. If you want to be there, it's going to be maybe this day around this time, right? If you want to, otherwise we're coming in without you there. A lot of renters don't want that. They want to be able to schedule a dedicated time. So we can do that. We can facilitate actually them going through online. It'll give them options and dates on a calendar. They can select the time they want that service technician to come out. Aside from that, there's also efficiencies for the owner, because our property managers, there's a whole task workflow for that system where they'll actually go through and actually have to approve these work orders before they're even pushed off to the field services teams. So there's efficiencies there. If it's something that we don't pay for, they're like, hey, my kitchen needs to be clean. Oh, okay. Unfortunately, that's not an approved work order. We're going to push that back, give that communication to the resident and make them aware. And then on other departments, your leasing agent, I mentioned that they have a dedicated leasing team, dedicated marketing teams, dedicated teams essentially operate, but they're able to take a lot of that lift off of anyone on site. So say we have a community that has somewhat of a hybrid staffing approach where there's a leasing agent on site or a community manager on site and maybe one porter. That leasing agent on multifamily would typically have to facilitate renewals, resident complaints, leasing, building out the lease contracts, assisting them with move-in, obviously going on tours and working through that. They'd have to inspect everything. There's a lot that leasing agent on the multifamily side has to facilitate, whereas we have different departments centrally that can facilitate that and take that off of their plate, which allows us to trim back on what those on-site staff would end up having to ultimately do, and therefore reduce payroll overall on those sites. So there's a lot of functionality there that provides that efficiency.
Interesting. Do you find that you take a look at the problems that these owners are seeking to solve, like when they go to market to figure out their property manager, how are they beginning to kind of prioritize, rank their evaluation criteria? Because like all those things that you described, that sounds like automatics, but they're not always choosing like the mind package. Like, why are they considering other alternatives? Why are they considering all the alternatives?
I think it is just, as I mentioned before, I think it's a matter of educating them about what other options there are. I think there's a hesitancy and a resistance there. And as this particular asset class grows and evolves, I think they start to learn more just by sometimes trial and error. I mean, we get a lot of owners that come to us after trying the legacy multifamily approach and saying, do it. And as you mentioned before, there was someone that said, you don't make any money in BTR. And I say, that's why you're doing it wrong, because you're probably applying a lot of unnecessary solutions to try and run this thinking that it has to be played that way or playbook that way.
Well, and a lot of things you talked about were pricing and packaging, right? And we're not going to get into too much of the pricing, but the packaging of it all. Like I know that if you were to price and package the services as a property manager from a multifamily perspective, it's a totally different bundle than what you're pricing and packaging in how you described it, right? So like what I want to buy versus what being sold may be different if it's a legacy provider versus a bespoke BTR SFR provider.
Correct. Yeah, I would agree. But the thing is, we're able to facilitate all of it, right? And that's right. Where we differentiate, because there's a lot that have gone and applied more of a single family approach and just said, hey, do a couple of things multi here and make that work. And if you're not built out for that, and you don't know how to facilitate that, or you don't have a dedicated marketing team that can oversee and dig into your SEM, SEO marketing campaigns and knows how to pivot and adjust your keyword searches and things of that nature, then you're not going to be able to be successful from that operator either. And that's why we are a happy blend between both, and we have that ability across the board.
And what I'm learning from our conversation here is that like the spectrum between vertical apartments and scattered site, it's not a clean spectrum. So you've got to understand the strategy of the owner, the kind of like the attributes of the site, be it rural, urban, suburban, whatever. And then there's a recommendation around how to manage that, lease it as best possible. That isn't cut and dry for everybody around. Like, I can't just run it like an SFR, and you can't just run like a multifamily, because it is the combination of both. And like this, and that must be, I mean, and again, your point about educating the buyers, they need to understand that those differences are there. What's interesting about it is that they are already owners in these. They've made the decision to build into this asset class or own this asset class because it's different. But it would be interesting to understand how many of them, like, they may see the penciling of owning the asset as being a diversification of their existing portfolio, of maybe being a single scatter site, maybe having some multifamily, but then they see this BTR as being a new way of packaging it together, but maybe not realizing the nuances of operating it relative to the differences between multifamily and single family. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I would agree. We see that all the time. And so that's where it's again, educating the market, educating the buyers, and making sure that they understand, I mean, not only how it needs to be operated and managed, but also sometimes you get a lot of these home builders that'll go through and they'll develop an asset the way they would for sale homes. And now you've got a product that is not meant for turnover. It's not meant for durability. It's not intended for easy access of maintenance. It's not, there's a lot of things that, allow for inconsistencies within the product as well. Like maybe I
heard a great example the other day, just having like shutoffs on the outside of the unit, right? Like water shutoff is on the outside of the unit and on the inside of the unit. Mm-hmm. So you can manage water shutoffs without having to disturb the resident or get into the house. So it's like things like that are like, okay, I get that. I see how that's different relative to a single family rental scattered site situation. And what's also, I mean, do you guys also get into, like, and given BTR is designed for rental, build to rent versus single family rental, do you ever get into the design of how to design and operate a BTR community so that when you do get into the operation side of things, it's easier? Like things like building a shutoff valve on the outside of the unit?
Sure. I mean, that's not a business service that we have where we're sitting here consulting on, design and development. However, we have key partners that we work with quite often on multiple different opportunities, and they'll continuously come to us for learning opportunities, strategy. I've certainly had those conversations with potential owners that I've been in discussions with, and they'll come to me and just say, like, we really value your opinion on this. What should we do? Should we do this? Does this make sense to put the HVAC system here? Is this a durable product for us? And certainly we're there to help, but in terms of, actual official business service to help with pre-dev, we don't typically do that, but absolutely here to help in terms of partners and relationships that we have.
Well, presumably it would emerge as being a gap, right? Like if you're a conventional home builder and you're used to building for single residence, that's just not going to be the same thing in terms of like a property that's going to be rented. To your point around durability, like it's probably very easy to underestimate the resilience of materials that you choose, and how you choose them can make a big difference. Plumbing fixtures is an example, right? Resilient plumbing fixtures are different than elegant plumbing fixtures. Now, elegant fixtures are resilient, but they can be a little bit, they're a little more nuanced than something that's going to be built for a forever turn, right?
Yeah. And to that point, also something that I see often is most home builders know that individuals may want to do their own customization of the cabinets, right? They may want to put their own knobs in. So they won't even pre-drill holes for those knobs. Now you've got renters coming in, applying their own knobs with different sizes, different locations. And now you have an consistent product throughout. Or maybe I've seen where they don't provide mirrors in the house because most individuals with their own cute mirror that they want there rather than providing one, but renters don't expect for that. I think it really is important to have those conversations and really think through, is this for a rental? Is this for a renter? And does this make sense for a renter? And obviously leveraging those conversations with individuals such as myself.
Could you talk a little bit around the warranty, new home warranty, kind of like the handover phase? Because that's another kind of like nuance to BTR. that doesn't necessarily exist in SFR, and certainly doesn't exist in multifamily. How is that different? How does that complicate things? If I've just built a 300 unit community and I'm like, this is gonna be easy. I'm just gonna get some property managers and we're gonna manage this thing. We're gonna make bank. But like, how does the warranty piece affect the resident experience and ultimately the operations of a BTR community in its first 2 years?
Yeah, and that's when I would say I would leverage probably more of my learnings on the multifamily side to make sure that you are properly securing not only the warranty management, but the preventative maintenance piece as well. Because at the end of the day, our key focus is NOI. Our key focus is operational efficiency and bottom line for our owners. And if you're not properly managing your warranty items, that's money out the door for them.
Mhm.
And obviously that provides that poor business relationships down the road. So proper warranty management on the upfront. It's great if we can get in there prior to even the initial onboards. That way we can develop and establish a great working relationship with the GC. From there, we can make sure that all pass downs are handed over properly. All of that is input we have within our proprietary software system, which is called Auto. That's the CRM that we use. Auto actually has a piece built out specifically for the warranty management. So every single asset within a home would then be logged, serial number, model number is provided. Then we're able to put in maybe set reminders to do check-ins on all of these. If there's any type of call out where we're having to then call and leverage the warranty department on any of these appliances, for example, we have all of that information. Any individual within our organization can jump in, pull that, hop on the call, make sure that it's facilitated. But we do have a system within our field services and property management operations where they can actually step-by-step facilitate managing all warranty items. So that's
another gap. That's another gap if I'm a conventional builder. Like, not gonna, I mean, just in terms of like the mindset of like, okay, single family rental, I have no warranty concept whatsoever. Multifamily, I mean, by the time it's very rare, it's invisible. Really, the warranty concept is somewhat invisible on the
there.
What's it called?
It's there, but is it being leveraged right?
It's kind of invisible, but on BTR, it's a big part of it, especially as all these new communities are being built. And so the problem to be solved is, okay, I need to lease up communities, but it's a little bit different than multifamily. It's a little bit different than single family. I need to operate these communities, and it borrows from parts from single family and borrows parts from BTR. So it's not the same. And I might think it's the same, or might, depending on my perspective. And you have this legal element of it in terms of the warranty obligation and how that first year of the occupation is managed with respect to who's paying for the deficiencies that may have come from construction, may have come from occupancy. We got to figure out, okay, was that, did that heat exchanger blow up because the resident simply didn't change the filter, or was it a bad heat exchanger? And who pays for that?
Right.
And
right.
Filters, the AC, whatever. And so those kind of nuances that are like the law in BTR, they're not, you can't opt in or out of that conversation.
Of course not. Yeah. And that's something, as you mentioned, that you see a huge gap in across the board, honestly. And so that's why I really, coming from, like I mentioned before, my specialty in the previous life of multifamily was challenging lease ups. With that, part of that challenge comes quite a bit. And even especially on like the high rise side, where there are very large mechanical systems that then have additional preventative maintenance and warranty that has to come into play. That was still always very manual in terms of managing those. I couldn't go through and pull reports to really drill down into what trends I'm seeing on some of these warranty issues. And on top of that, it's kind of up to me and maybe the maintenance supervisor, who are both very busy on a property that's in lease up, to do all of the tracking down and trying to get in touch with those subcontractors who are then responsible before that warranty time wears out, and make sure that it's logged and noted and that everyone is made aware. It takes a very strong working relationship with that GC to ensure that they're, because sometimes they're hands off and they don't want to deal with their subcontractor.
Yeah, for sure. There's situations where
department. Pardon?
I've seen situations where the GC is just asking the manager to have the resident contact the trade directly.
Yeah.
Right. Well, that's like a pipeline for spending money. So if I get a phone number for the plumber, well, I'm going to call the plumber for everything. They might even be doing my, HVAC stuff. They're going to do whatever I can get them to do. I'll get them to do, because I don't have to pay for it, and it's kind of like a free pass.
It's
So that really, and then following up on who gets paid and why they get paid, right? Because we talk a lot about that resident experience in the first year, and like that first year, well, the first 90 days of occupancy is so critical for retention, especially in a new buildup. And you've got this extra nuance of a third person at the table, which is the vendor or the trade that is on task for that warranty. So when we talk about the complexities of maintenance, it's not simply I've got a leaky toilet and I'm going to go call Andrea, who's in the maintenance coordinator and the bottom floor, and she's going to come up and fix it. There's more to navigate because of the legal obligations of each party, and all with the objective of how to drive NOI. So if you don't have it figured out, it can get really expensive very quickly because of all these different nuances that relate to that the fact that it's a home and it's not scattered but not consolidated, and it's got a warranty element to it from a resident experience perspective.
And so something that is actually a common trend that you do sometimes see with some of these BTR opportunities or BTR communities is that the resident itself takes a little more ownership in terms of some of the.
They're also more mature, like typically, right?
Exactly. So they're not going to necessarily put in a work order for every little thing that's like, oh, technically this light bulb, is on, them to the property manager to come out and replace for me.
Yeah.
They'll take a little more ownership of things, which can be detrimental to the warranty experience, right? So if you have a faulty toilet, for instance, that has issues that maybe this resident is a little bit handy and is like, I bet I know what it is. And they start messing around. Little do they know, we actually have a trend in an entire case with that subcontractor because it's faulty. And we're keeping that and we're making sure we're looking. So they'll try and maybe fix it. Boom, warranty's voided, right? So it's a matter of making sure that there's open communication and dialogue with these residents as well, so that they do truly understand that process, which is why the proprietary software that we use really does help in that way as well, because there's a lot of instant communication, instant messaging, where not everybody wants to pick up the phone and wait and talk to somebody. They can do that live in real time for most situations when they're able to kind of troubleshoot and talk through it with us. And so that's beneficial as well. But to the point of it being a very manual management process in the multifamily side, that's where that auto, our CRM system, is really beneficial, because we can log and track that in real time as well. And anyone can jump in and assist with that. So it's really helpful.
So when you're getting into the hell yes part of it, so I think that thank you very much for helping establish and elaborate on how it's different. And that helps formulate everyone's understanding of the problem and why the problem is unique to BTR. When you're talking to customers that kind of are hell yes, right? Like they've got their choices before them of things that they can choose. We talked about how like conventional approach has gaps to it and the SFR approach has gaps to it. You guys have brought together your background in multifamily, and you've got, the Mine/Roofstock's kind of like legacy history of being successful in managing SFR all across the US. Like those two things are coming together to solve this platypus that's BTR. And you've got the same solution, the remix. I call it a remix. It sounds better than a platypus. This remix of BTR, and then the remix of the way to manage it and solve it. People make other choices sometimes. Like, how do you find that they're like, what kind of objections, or why do they say no?
I think that the centralized approach, which again, it's about educating, we don't always do centralized approach. Just because we say we have hybrid, just because we say we trim down staffing, I think there's still a lot of hesitancy around like, oh, the residents are going to have like people all over the place there, for every little thing. We really want to make sure that we're not scaling back on customer service or resident experience, which is 100% fair. Absolutely understand that. But it's really just about educating them on what can be done and why, and how that's not 100% necessary. So really, I would say that the reason that they don't go through that is because they are sold on this concept of, we want strictly multifamily. We don't want to lack in anything for these residents. But the more, as I mentioned before, the more and more we talk to individuals out there and owners out there, the more they're seeing the benefits of this type of an approach. Really where we differentiate in terms of whether or not we will even leverage or feel that it's needed to leverage any kind of on-site personnel would be if it's highly amenitized, If it's a larger, I mean, we do use unit count depending upon the asset, but I've also managed BTR that was 300 units, and we've done it effectively with 0 on-site staffing, and we leased it up in record time, right? So it really just depends upon each individual asset, which speaks again to that cookie cutter approach. There are some that maybe they leverage an HOA, and the HOA is kind of more overseeing some of those amenities. And so again, not really needing that individual on site at all times, because a lot of the systems and functions that that person would have are removed from the on-site management approach. So they're strictly there as kind of, a face to help with touring and really just someone to talk to. But the more and more we evolve, we think through, let's say, when I was in I don't want to date myself, but let's just say in my early 20s, right? I recall being in multifamily, and I recall many individuals on site just saying, we have to do flyers at every single door for every notification for these residents. We had to go out and flyer the community because we had some older clientele who were not as tech savvy, who were not interested in leveraging email. Well, now you're not even going to get the Dropbox option to pay your rent, where you're putting an order in there or a check. You're having to pay online. You have to, maybe in some situations, you have to auto enroll and auto pay. You're not going to get any kind of notice at your door unless it's a legal notice. You're going to always get an email notification. And we've evolved. Even older demographics who maybe at one point were a little more resistant to the technology, they understand it, and we're here for it, right? So I think that people need to understand that we are underestimating some of these clients at times. We don't need the hand-holding at all times, and we can certainly facilitate just as much efficiency and quality of customer experience, if not more. You leverage the systems and resources that we have.
And given the clients, are moving into BTR as a diversification of their existing portfolio, let's say multifamily, and they have relationships with existing multifamily operators, right, for their existing assets. Those types of customers have a pre-existing relationship, and so call it whatever, big fee manager company, and they may want to say, hey, we can take care of this as well. That would be a good salesperson, a good relationship manager with that fee manager. How are you able to find those customers, or do you find those customers that have those clients, that have a pre-existing relationship with a large multifamily operator or national multifamily operator, and they have tried it and now they're seeking options? What's that like?
Oh, that's a very, very common conversation that we're having currently. And we do find some that are like, you know what? We have that relationship established. We love what they're able to do over here on this type of an asset where it's highly amenitized, it's this many units, so on and so forth. But we really do clearly see the inefficiency in applying that same playbook and strategy over here on this asset that has no amenities, and there's only 70 units, right? So we get that often as well, where they're like, let's diversify who we're working with. And we don't always necessarily have to stay married to one individual operator. Why not we do these operators here and here? And then we love that. We love those because that's an opportunity. The proof is in the pudding, right? We've been saying this. We've been screaming it from the roof. There's a lot of efficiencies with our playbook. Come check it out. Allow us to work on this one for you, show you what all we are able to do for you here. And then next step, you'll probably want to try us out on one of those larger opportunities, right? For the next one that's in the pipeline. We love having those conversations, and we're completely open to it and completely understand that sometimes it's a matter of them testing it out, really figuring out how we operate versus others and seeing where those efficiencies lie. But ultimately, I think it's pretty much common sense at this point that you don't want to have an overabundance of payroll with these operators who are going to charge you back for the uniform. They're going to charge you back for a cell phone for that maintenance technician. They're going to charge you back for a budget boot camp that they're going to send all their PMs out to work on your budget for you. You're not going to want to pay back for employee appreciation recognition every single month. And all these additional fees and costs that do factor in and build up and eat away your NOI. All of those are very standard practice for a multifamily operator. And it's just not something that we feel is necessary. And on top of that, commissions can be very, very significant of cost. We build our commissions in. That's not something that gets billed back to the owner either. So that's just one more efficiency that we can bring to the table.
Well, it's interesting when you talk to multifamily operators in terms of their fee structures right now. So we can get into pricing, but we're just drifting that way. But it's like they're struggling, or one of the struggles I hear often is that they're coming close to zero on fee structures, right? And that and they're not at zero by any means, but like they're coming very close to zero on fee structures, and it's getting even more competitive at that level. And so they're relying more and more on amenity revenue to be able to bulk up their P&Ls. And so I'm finding it, there's almost this multifamily is emerging as being very different than BTR or a single family, in that it's about managing, or I'll say accessing the full wallet of that resident. So like they want to get, there's a piece of the cleaning service that comes in, there's a piece of the restaurant service that comes in, there's a piece of the vending machines that are at the bottom, there's all this amenity revenue that's built into their P&L. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that like that business is emerging to be, the property management fees are getting so low that it's more the right to manage the distribution channel of all the things that go into that particular tower of discretionary spend. Mm-hmm. And so you see a lot of companies are doing exceptionally well. Like Amenify is doing awesome by being able to channel in the fee managers as a distribution channel for accessing commercial services or retail services to those residents. Like that's a part of the business that maybe might emerge in BTR. But that's a big part of the P&L in the multifamily side of things, because the property management fees have been squeezed so tightly. And so you see this kind of like emergence of different behaviors and motivations and incentives, because ultimately the problem that I'm seeking to solve, right, as an asset owner is very differently defined in BTR than as it is in multifamily. I'll just expand on that a little bit, just using those three categories as the classes. Like in multifamily, I want to build an asset that's going to be, I'm going to have that asset for quite a long time. This will sound a lot like BTR. And it's all about the long duration to build that asset up, the type of people in that asset. I'm seeking, I'm okay with 60% turnover. I'm not okay with it, but I accept it. I've got payroll burden. I've got kind of like built-in metrics that pencil out my P&L for the NOI on that particular building. Then you kind of get into SFR, where SFR is a lot of it's like an acquisition and divestiture game, where it's like, can I build pockets of efficiencies by buying? I'm really good at buying assets and managing assets that can run themselves. But then ultimately, I've got to rely on the local network to 1099 on any sort of remediation, repairs, scoping, workovers, turns, whatever, because I don't have direct access to it. I can be a very successful SFR owner by having 100 assets in 40 states. I wouldn't say 40, but let's say 4 states, right? And that convergence of having everything on a single block, 100 units in a vertical tower, 300 units in a vertical tower, 100 units in 4 different states, and then having the BTR, which is in the middle of it all, remix of those both, and how that plays out a little bit differently, because it's going to have a different type of asset owner. Often it's, like you mentioned, it's often a former builder who's like optimizing their ability to build a good unit, and now they're building for themselves. They want to keep it. There's a ton of incentives right now to keep units for these builders so that they can begin to turn them into a rental property and reduce the housing burden. So all this is kind of all happening all in real time, which is very exciting for like the hell yes customer. Because if you're, let's say it takes you 18 months to build out a community, or at least let's call it 18 months to phase out a community, and you're now getting into occupation, lease up, and maintenance and ownership and the warranty period. These are all very, very different elements to owning a BTR community. And the reason why you're willing to take on all those different new elements is because it's got longer lease times. It's got more stable residents. It's got kind of more. And so that makes it for a much more attractive, a differently attractive asset class than you would look at in a multifamily. So I think it's really, I thank you for sharing a ton, because like for everyone listening, like it is very much, while it may look and sound like one or the other, that combination makes it very different. And that difference is how you guys are winning the market and finding your hell yes customers, because it's those that appreciate the differences, which is why you talk about education, that begin to select a bespoke BTR operator like Roofstock Mind, because you understand those differences specifically, and not get distracted by some of the things that are shoring up the P&L in multifamily, and not getting distracted by things that are shoring up the P&L in single family, right? So it's interesting to hear this, because it for a while there, like let's say a couple of years ago, BTR felt like this little bit of a stepchild, but it really is emerging as its own asset class that requires its own touch.
Agreed. Yeah, I think it's the future for sure. I don't think it's going anywhere. I think it's here to stay, and I think it's going to continue to evolve, just as multifamily does, right? I mean, multifamily, every year there's some new hot amenity that you got to have a golf simulator if you don't have a golf simulator, or whatever it may be. And so some are here to stay, like dog parks, and some are not, right? Like golf simulators. You learn how difficult those are to calibrate and utilize. But it's definitely evolving. And to double click into a piece that you kind of mentioned just a little while ago was the other income piece, right? So yes, maybe they're dwindling down the PM fee over here, but we've done side-by-side comparisons all day long with T12s of legacy multifamily operators on these BTR deals. And while they're, really small, minimal PM fee over here, looks great, but at the end of the day, it actually factors out to 11% total overall when you think through all of the different things that are charged back to that owner versus what we would charge and have already included within that service. And so it's really good for us to do that comparison, and we love having the opportunity to do that exercise. Another part on that other income piece is you can do that, and that's great. Ancillary income is great. We do that as well. Any additional, fees that are charged back to the resident, amenity fees, smart home packages, whatever that may be, that's great. But you have to be mindful of the fact that the more you charge back to them, the more you price yourself out of certain pools of prospects. And because at the end of the day, they're budgeting in a lot of these situations. They're budgeting every single $100 that they have to spend every single month. And so if you're going to do $200, $225, even $175 additional in other income back to these residents, where is that getting offset? Because I'm seeing where they're not offsetting it in the budget or pro forma when they're proposing this. And it's kind of a strategy move where they'll overpromise, underdeliver, unfortunately, because they'll load up the budget with all of this income piece, claim to receive it at the market rent that they're already trying to budget and say it's worth. But if that market rent, if you're doing it at market rent for value of that unit alone, but then you're adding on another $200, and then you're doing very little concession, it's going to sit. It will not lease. So now you're either having to offset by increasing concessions, bringing down market value, you're affecting your overall value of the asset. But on top of all of that, we're also seeing where they'll over budget on marketing altogether, and then also over budget on payroll, and kind of just take the approach of sitting back and waiting for them to come. And that's another fault that we see with legacy multifamily versus BTR, because BTR, you do still have to really work that market and make sure that you're out there being creative with your approach, working and facilitating those preferred employer programs, getting creative with where your marketing dollars are allocated. If you have a military base close by, become an official offsite military housing facility. If you have a key university nearby and you want to target those students, you may not actually penetrate that the way that you would think just by being there and advertising on normal marketing solutions. No, get creative, become an official offsite housing provider for that university. And now you're getting all of them coming through, which we have seen done. So you have to be creative. You can't just assume that you're going to overload on marketing and have the staff there to wait. And that's where you really see that they just kind of don't take that initiative and really push to get them through the door, whereas that's very standard for us. So lots of operational inefficiencies in that regard as well.
It kind of makes for some exciting conversations, though, like just the opportunity to be creative, like given your career journey of going from, in lease up and multi and all these different spaces, and then getting into, and all in Houston, right? And then getting into where you are now with the VTR side of things, it's a nice challenge to think through, because the playbook has enough run pass options to it that it keeps things getting creative. Like it's very intellectually stimulating, right? Because you kind of sit down and work with your team and say, okay, how are we going to win this one? How are we going to do this one? How could we be different? And how could we take our lessons from the last few and apply that to how we're going to win this community and manage it and operate it and deliver the NOI commitment that we're going to put forward?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been very exciting, honestly, because it's nationwide, right? So I'm getting many different markets that we're having to apply the strategy to. Now I've moved into more of the business development aspect of it rather than the operational function, but still serve as a liaison for those operational teams if ever there's consulting needing to jump in and kind of get creative, build out a different marketing plan or work on it. But our teams are very well equipped, very well versed, and it's been really exciting to kind of see how we've gotten creative and we've been able to make a lot of movement and kind of shake it up on the side of the industry, because I feel like we are truly the solution for BTR, and we're seeing more and more of that velocity as we gain more clients coming onto our platform.
That's amazing. Cool. Okay. So kind of winding things down, we've kind of been doing recaps throughout. When you look back at I think, and looking back at your career, starting out in the leasing side of multifamily, now I'm the director of institutional relationships and as well the director of BTR for mine, Roofstock. You've had it's a very dynamic shift. I can guess on some answers here, but I'm curious to hear a bit of advice you would give yourself, a younger self, or maybe even somebody who's joining work with you around being successful and finding these hell yes clients.
I would say trust myself more. So many times throughout my career, there have been opportunities or situations where I was like, that does not add up. That does not make sense. Let's try this approach. And, it's one of the issues with legacy multifamilies. A lot of these processes are already well established and in place, and they kind of are resistant to move away from that. So definitely trusting myself, because coming into this role with Mind and Roofstock, I was given a lot of that ability to kind of take the lead on a lot of these initiatives and build that out. I was right. There was a lot that we had the ability to do that we just weren't. And so seeing that efficiency, I would just tell myself, definitely trust yourself, see what's going on, and don't just trust the standard process that's always there, and get creative and dive in and look for other ways to kind of work outside the box to make sure that you are as successful as possible for you and your owner.
I definitely got the flavor of that when we met it up in Dallas. I was excited to have you on the show. Probably 5 minutes into our conversation, just because of the way you were articulating your arguments, your positioning, all these things. And in addition, I think that like your point about trust yourself, I mean, you're the product of trusting yourself. And it's fun. It's an incredible conversation to have with you today. And again, harkening back to the conversation we had a couple weeks back, like it was something that I was very excited and had to book you right away, because I hope that everyone else appreciates the kind of conversation we had, and just sharing your understanding around how this market is different, how you guys are going out there to win their market, how you're leveraging your existing differentiations and best practices and legacy experience to win the market that's emerging. And I'll also share your opinion. This is going to be a huge market. But I look at like the second most expensive purchase in people's lives, automobiles, and I look at the curve on leasing in automobiles. I see BTR as just being a functional financial way of affording housing. I do not see the housing solution solving itself. I believe the housing problem is a financial problem, not a supply problem. And thinking that supply is going to fix financial is a bit backwards in terms of the way I think about it. And so I'm thrilled to hear that there are folks like yourself and mine and Roofstock and all your partners that are beginning to build these communities that are, I'll say, economically available to people, and give them choices. Like, as a parent of 3 kids, there's maybe not all 3 are going to own a house someday. And maybe that's actually the right decision for them, because owning a house is expensive. And it's full of unforeseen risks that you might not fully capture. And so for the residents out there, this market, I believe it has to emerge. And I've been to some of these, and they're just gorgeous, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's very exciting to have conversations with yourself, the rest of the folks at Mind Roofstock, and everyone in this industry, because I think what's happening is going to be very transformational for home seekers in the world today, and where they're going to seek to live their life, because affordability is a big problem, and more homes doesn't necessarily solve that problem.
I agree. Yeah. And I think that the great thing about BTR is we're filling a need for many different generations throughout people's life cycles, right? So it's not just the natural progression of those young professionals who are now having their first children and family and evolving into wanting home ownership that's more attainable, right? Or the feel of home ownership, or living with a yard and a driveway. It's not just those individuals that we're targeting or that we're seeing flocking to BTR. It's empty nesters now. It's people who are retiring or wanting to sell their homes because they are tired of having to keep up with the maintenance. And so there's many, many different generations that are coming in that are filling this need, which is causing more of a drive for the demand. Whereas other asset classes or types, such as multifamily and like maybe an urban community, they're really kind of more focused around particular demographics, maybe young professionals. We're capturing it all here. So definitely see a future with BTR.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much today. Appreciate your advice on trust yourself. Appreciate you for everything you shared today. Thank you so much for being on today.
Yeah.
Everyone listening on the podcast, or if you're on Spotify or Apple, like, subscribe. That always makes it easier for people to find us. If you catch this later on LinkedIn or through some of the snippets that come out later on, obviously, if you have any comments, tag us. We'll jump in and answer any questions you might have. Brittney, thank you so much for having us. Thank you for sharing your journey, and also how this is all different than everything else that's out there. It's a unique animal that's solving a lot of problems on both sides. So appreciate you being there for everyone out there.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Take care and enjoy the rest of your day. We'll catch up in a second here. You're awesome.